Hello, students. All right, let me get your names down. So we're going over test 3. This is it. This is your final. All right, and I want to remind you to use the telephone number that I gave you. Should you have any difficulty contacting me in the next couple weeks that I have given on an announcement. All right, as I will be in and out of home for several reasons. So at any rate, as I'm getting the names down, are there any questions or comments? This is our last Zoom meeting for the semester. It's somewhat flown by. You're thinking, yeah, it's flown by for you, not for me doing all these assignments.
When are grades final for this semester?
They are, I have to do them next weekend. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I have to have everything finished, Xander, this weekend, by the end of the weekend.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you for asking. That's a good question. Anybody else? And I haven't forgotten about your extra credit points, okay? I'm going to put them at the end of one of your 3 tests. And I'll remind you on an announcement, so you'll know where to look for an inflated grade. Okay, good. Thank you, Naya. Let's see here. All right, anybody else? You guys doing okay? You surviving? You making it? So hopefully you've done the last couple assignments. I hope my instructions were clear enough. I hope the videos were of help, especially not doing the last couple subjects via a Zoom meeting. I myself can't imagine just doing them. I mean, I can't imagine, but it would have been a little difficult for me probably to do the last couple assignments. Maybe not so much the argumentative because you're accustomed to that format. But then when I suddenly asked you to do a write-up on one of 5 questions, and presuming that you haven't really read much yet on the Civil War, as you're not paid to do that, like I am. All right, so let me see, let me make sure I have all the names down. So I hope that you made use of that and watched my videos. Okay, so let's see here. Let me make sure I have 11 names down. I'm missing one. Let's see here. Okay, I found it. All right.
Mine, I just joined the class, Professor Leslie.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you very much. I have you down. All right. Any other questions? And then we're just going to dive right into the test. Okay. So I'm going to go.
Can I ask what sorry, Professor, can I ask what the previous questions were?
There weren't, there was one actually from Xander. He asked when the final grades will be turned in. And I told him I need to do it this weekend. So
okay, great.
By Monday, you should have your final grade by Monday. All right. So thank you for your patience. I know I have at least about 4 assignments I still need to do. All
yes.
Right. Oh, please also remember, okay, on the assignments I have done, the colonial ones, the first like 4 or 5, the War for Independence, I've done the Early Republic. If you did not turn one in and I gave you a 0 and you wanted to get partial credit for it by turning it in lately, please give me a Canvas message. Please let me know so I know to go back to that assignment, because in my mind, right, I'm done. I'm done with those assignments. I got to move on to the other 4. But if you have done it, I want you to get good grades. I really do. And so if you do want it the last minute for partial credit, please let me know so I know to say, okay, I need to go back to the northern colonies. You know, so-and-so has turned them in lately, and I want to give her at least some points rather than 0. and I'll note to go back to that assignment, okay?
I had a question, Professor.
Yes.
You said that you weren't able to open one of my assignments and it wouldn't let me resubmit it. So I just resubmitted it in the comments.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to make sure you can get it. I guess because I kept going to try again and it kept sending you the same link.
Okay, that's really good to know. Okay, assignment and comments. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I wish I knew the specifics. I wish I could tell you precisely what formats are rejected and which ones are accepted. I really don't know. There's an option when where you could limit the formats, and I never choose to do that. So I try to keep it as broad as the system will allow it. And so on those grades, instead of a 0, instead of a 50, I have an X. And so that's great to know, because actually there are a couple students, and of course I won't name them. I don't mean to embarrass anyone, but there are a couple students who have multiple assignments that I could not open. And on the comments, when I give the grades, okay, Robert Anderson, let's see here. Get this down, Early Republic. But on the comments, I ask, right, please resubmit this and let me know, because, you know, for these two students, I mean, we're talking 5, no problem, Robert. Thank you for letting me know. We're talking 5 or 6 assignments in which I could not open his or her work. And so it means everything getting that new format in, so I can grade his or her stuff. So yeah, absolutely. And again, I want to let everyone know, please feel free to use the phone number that I gave you this last week, because everything counts communication wise. I don't want to have to go back and do a change of grade, which I can do. But I always feel awkward with my dean. I like it, like I'm being a nuisance to him because he has to approve it and so forth. So I'd like to know, you know, anything that I need to be aware of. You know, oh yeah, remember that you told me that you're not going to mark 10 points off my grade on this particular assignment because I told you that I'm out of state, and because of the message that I gave you in Canvas, please remember not to mark it down, or something of that sort. Or like what I was just told, an assignment is put in the comments. That's very vital. I never would have looked in the comments for an assignment. So so by all means, utilize that phone number to let me know of anything that I need to be aware of and putting in your final grade this weekend. Okay. So so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the third test. Okay. Let's see here. All right. So let's see here. The democratization during the Jacksonian period, right? When was the culture and our institutions made more democratic, more in line with the will of the people and the power and participation and command of the people, okay, during the 1820s and 1830s. So for one, the franchise, right? Citizenship. Citizenship was open to more and more people as property requirements were dropped. It's not very impressive, by the way, by today's standards, right? You're just talking white property owners alone were citizens. Then during this time period, virtually all white men became citizens. So by today's standards, of course, not very impressive. Also, the convention system, the party convention system of nominating people. Now, if you join one of the two political parties, the Democratic Party, which emanated from the Democratic Republican Party of the liberals, the first oppositional party to the Federalists, right? Remember when they were concerned about Alexander Hamilton and his system, etc. They truncated the name and took off Republicans, and now they're just Democrats by this time of Andrew Jackson. And the other party were the Whigs. And the Whigs, right, like the Whig Party in England, contending that they were against the arbitrary rule of their chief executive, against King Andrew, as they derisively called him, his opponents. So at any rate, if you join the Democrat or the Whig Party, you could go to a local, and it would be publicized when the local meetings, conventions would take place and where. You can go there and nominate anyone, any citizen at least, to run for office. And then the winners of the local conventions would vie with one another at a regional convention, and then from the regional to the state convention, and if need be, for the office from state to federal. So on paper, at least theoretically, you know, Joe Bob living in a small little town in Kentucky could now run for office. So the party convention system occurred, right? You also have increased political participation at this time. You look at the back of the book and it's pretty impressive. And I have it in the argumentative handout. Remember, so many questions come from the argumentative assignments. So feel free to make use of those when you're taking test 3. Because remember, on test 3, I just allow one submission, okay? I try to be as accommodating as possible on test 1. I gave you guys 2 submissions on test 2. So now for test 3, it's one and done. So be careful, okay? There shouldn't be a time limit, however, unless you take so long that the page expires. Because I'm philosophically against time limits. I want you to take as much time as you need. So be deliberate in your answers, okay? And note that this is the only 50 point, only one of 15, 16, 50 point assignments throughout the semester. So don't be too disheartened if you don't do as well as you have liked to have done. But increased political participation for sure. At some points, up to 80%, 80, wow, of eligible voters were going to the polls and voting. So that was pretty impressive. The direct presidential election of electors, so not direct election, but the election of the electors directly, like we do today, began. It was more convoluted than that under the Constitution and during the early Republic. So they democratized the elections of the president and vice president as well. Now, did they do away with the electoral college system? Of course not. We have that to this day. All right. Let's see. So Jackson's era, it benefited only white men. To an extent, populism did reign. And oftentimes there was a tyranny of the majority, as explained by some visitors like Alexa de Tocqueville in his famous Democracy in America book. So that's important to remember. And remember, I define populism as kind of the lowest, appealing to the lowest common denominator, whereby candidates would try to appear to be one of us, one of the demos, one of the commoners, right? And in return for our votes, they would push our emotional and intellectual buttons, what we feared, what we hated, what we coveted and desired, etc. And they would offer those things in return for our votes. So in particular, right, you have like Andrew Jackson. He appealed to the common man with his frontier image, the fact that he was of Scots-Irish birth, and the Scots-Irish, just a generation before, were seen as, quote, the scum of Europe. Now suddenly it was in vogue, right? With these log cabin campaigns where you would try to outdo your opponent, your political opponent, and contending that you were born of humble origins in the frontier, for instance. And oftentimes, right, he appealed to the pocketbook and to the economic aspirations of the common people by offering them easy and available credit and land, right? And so all those seem to be true. Alexa de Tocqueville, when he spoke about the growing democratic trends of that time period, when he came from France and was, he only went through about 4 states, but from what he saw, he put together Democracy in America. Sorry, that's my system. My son loves the system to play music, and when I say de Tocqueville's first name, she thinks I'm talking to her. But at any rate, so Mr. de Tocqueville, he had reservations, right? When you read Democracy in America, he was concerned with America becoming, quote, too democratic. He was worried about at the nuclear level of parents there being disrespect for, and not that same deference, right, of knowing your place from the sons and daughters directed toward their mothers and fathers. He was concerned about the popular vote gobbling up the minority. Remember that, as I put in there, some people would derisively contend that democracy is like two wolves and one lamb voting on what's for dinner. Obviously, the two wolves are going to outvote the lamb and vote on eating the lamb. And so the lamb, right, in the person of, in the demographics of Native Americans, African Americans, women, and other marginalized groups that were kind of kicked to the corner, they didn't have much of a say, and sometimes the will of the majority stomped upon their rights. So all that was a source of concern for Mr. de Tocqueville. And then when he wrote that, one of his famous quotes in his famous book was that he saw a general equality of condition amongst Americans. That he said, you didn't see the same as you did back in Europe, the same disparity or gap between the rich and the poor. He said a lot of Americans that it really was becoming like Aristotle's middle class society, but in this case, not middle class, a working class society. Of aspiring entrepreneurs, of aspiring business owners, in particular cash crop farmers. And so he was impressed by that. However, statistical analysis seems to refute that. When they look at tax returns and they look at different things, primary sources, there's a lot of evidence of quite a disparity between the rich and the poor. So he seems to have been a little misinformed, or in my case, I think it's just a little bit myopic, a little narrow-minded, because he only saw about 4 states. So the areas where he went, he probably did see a general equality of condition, but that doesn't seem to pan out with the stats when you look at the entire country in the 1830s. And so President Jackson, especially when he engaged in controversial acts like putting an end to the Bank of the United States and refusing to sign the renewal of its charter, and also in bringing about the Trail of Tears with the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, and other civilized tribes. He contended that he had a popular mandate, that the people, right, like the Spanish word mandato, to command, that the people were commanding him, that's what the will of the people, the will of the majority of civilians, of white male civilians, that's what they wanted. So who was he to stop what they wanted? And again, right, you can go back to the founding fathers, and when they read their Montesquieu and other Enlightenment works, they were not all about democracy per se, right? They arguably were about a balanced type of government that did not just adhere to the majority of civilians, but also looked out for the general welfare, looked out for the numerical minority, etc. All right, let's see here. The Trail of Tears. So remember, it involved a power struggle between the state legislators who were trying to force through eminent domain laws to force the tribes to sell their lands. And because that's what the voters wanted. They coveted the Native American lands, like Ashota, which was the nation of the Cherokee in the Carolinas and in Georgia. And so at any rate, the states were trying to force them through eminent domain laws to sell their lands, these native tribes, but the federal government had given them that land by way of treaties. So it was kind of a state versus federal issue. And then also, yes, Leslie.
Yeah, so so we're going through, right now we were on 5 and now we're on 8.
Yes, I'm on 8. And I feel I scratched off, to be honest, 6 and 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we do that one more time, 1 through 8?
Yeah. So with number 1, right? Yeah. So you need. Let's see here. So with number 1, the franchise was broadened. The direct election of electors happened. There was increased political participation in politics. The party convention system democratized the nomination of candidates, but the electoral college system was not erased or nullified. We still have it. And with Jacksonian era, in that it was democratic, most they're not democratic. Most policies did just benefit white men. Some minority groups suffered from the tyranny of the majority, and populism did, to an extent, seem to reign at that time. Moving on to 3, populism was described as a you scratch my back, I scratch yours, a quid pro quo process between politicians who wanted the votes from the citizenry, and in return they gave the citizenry what they wanted as far as their base aspirations, like wanting to keep slaves and buy slaves, wanting to take Native American lands, wanting to take credit from the federal bank and put it into local wildcat banks to get them easy credit to start a business. All that seems to be true. Moving on to 4, Andrew Jackson did appeal to the common man with a frontier self-made man image, just what the people wanted to see and wanted to hear, that he was one of them, right, to his common voters. And he did endorse democratic changes in the republic, which was a popular thing amongst the citizens, the poor white citizens, and all offer access to land and credit. That is all true. Mr. de Tocqueville, he did speak about democratization. Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
Oh no, sorry. I was just I forgot
Okay.
to mute. I forgot to mute myself.
Okay. Oh, no problem. So Mr. de Tocqueville did he did not praise the democratization that was going on. To one extent, it impressed him, but he had reservations. And you need to remember that for number 5. With number 6, the stats do not show that there was a general equality of condition, that there was in reality quite a disparity, as there always seems to have been in American history, or the history of most nations, I would argue, quite a disparity or gap between the rich and the poor. And number 7, he did use the term popular mandate to excuse controversial decisions that he made, like the Trail of Tears episode and the killing, so to speak, of the National Bank of the U.S. All right.
Okay.
So then with number 8, we talked about it was a power struggle between the state legislators trying to get the natives to sell their lands, and the federal government, which had granted those same lands to the Native Americans by way of federal treaties. Popularly elected assemblymen did use eminent domain laws to try to force the native tribes to sell their lands, and arguably so that they could provide those lands to their poor white voters, citizens. And the Supreme Court, however, defended the Native Americans, right? When it was made about power in the famous Worcester case, Worcester. In the Worcester case, it was decided in the Supreme Court that a federal treaty trumps a mere state law. And so because the federal treaty said the natives could have that land, thus they could have that land. But then Andrew Jackson defied that, and he did use paternalistic rhetoric, like he was a father-like figure, saying it was for their own protection and their own good that the Native Americans removed themselves from the Carolinas and Georgia and moved to Arkansas and Oklahoma, generically known as Indian Territory. All right. With number 9, moving on to antebellum, which just means before the war, before the Civil War of 1861 to 65, westward expansion. So the instructor used behavioral data to prove the existence of racism in 19th century America because the press, politicians, and other primary source writers were not foolish enough to admit to such. No, that is not true. Remember, in the handout, you'll find just the contrary, where the argument was conveyed that there was absolutely overt evidence of racism, that generation of the 1840s in particular did not even try to hide or mask. Okay. And then from the Chicano perspective of the Mexico's loss of Texas, they did depict Anglo settlers as ingrates who were ungrateful for very generous terms that were offered to them by the Mexican government. They did refuse to fulfill their part of the bargain, and they did take advantage of Santa Anna's super conservative constitution as a convenient excuse or pretext for rebellion. All right. Then when you do court history, what we learned as children, some of us, the argument is that Santa Anna's and the April 6th law were justifiable reasons for the Texas Rebellion, right? In particular, Santa Anna's new constitution, the 7 laws, as it was known, they took away arguably a degree of local autonomy and representative government from the people throughout Mexico, including Texas. So they contend, right, that it was a fight for freedom and for local autonomy and representative government. Then number 12, let's see here, suggesting that the federal government was not in the proverbial driver's seat. This is very subjective. This is very arguable. Yes, 2 participants raise hand, please.
Can you scroll down a little bit, please?
Sure.
Thanks.
Let's see here. Come on. All right. So number 12, it's true because that's the argument that is conveyed in the antebellum westward expansion handout. It's not the gospel truth to be accepted universally without criticism, okay? But it is the argument that was conveyed, and that's all I'm asking on that number, is contending that there was popular pressure put upon the politicians to take Hispanic and Native American lands and English lands in the Oregon Territory during the antebellum period. That's arguable, but I tried to defend that, okay? And that is true that it's cited in the handout. So moving on to 13, this unhealthy habit and cycle of Americans manufacturing unity by way of stigmatizing and quote other group, right? Like Native Americans, African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, etc. But in this case, especially Hispanics, coveting that demographic's land and justifying war with that demographic. And that was conveyed as a thesis in the handout. So I can't stress that enough, you guys. Look to your argumentative assignments when you take this test. So much of it comes straight out of them. Then moving on to 14, Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis contended that the West renewed American meritocracy, that it renewed equality of opportunity for all, right? For whoever was talented, hardworking, lucky, and inventive enough, right? So if that's not what's on number 14, then that means it would be false, okay? His thesis, right? He did contend that there were indiscriminate dangers and opportunities alike in the West. And that's how he begins to defend his claim that the American West renewed meritocracy, right? Of you rising or falling, you winning or losing, right? Socially, politically, and economically by merit, that there's equal footing for everyone, that it was equally dangerous for everyone, but there were also equally accessible opportunities for everyone. All right, so he does convey that. Moving on to 16, which Gold Rush data does not seem to support Frederick Jackson Turner's thesis. A temporary lack of institutions.
You skipped over 15, Professor.
Okay, so no, I mean, I didn't mean to. Let's see here. So remember, so Frederick Jackson Turner stressed how the Western overland trails confronted all settlers alike with indiscriminate dangers and opportunities. So that's meant to be true. That's the heart of his thesis as far as renewing American meritocracy. Let's see here. With the gold rush, what seems to not fit with Jackson's thesis So you're looking for anything that goes against meritocracy, right? As your answer that does not fit, because he was all about meritocracy. So a temporary lack of institutions and reputation of lawlessness in California gold country, that would fit with his thesis, right? Because that's showing indiscriminate dangers, right, in the West. Mineral wealth initially extracted with little or no need for capital for beginning money or expertise, that would fit with his thesis as well as an equal opportunity for whoever gets to that mineral wealth, to that gold first, right? Deserves and quickly earns wealth. Entrepreneurial opportunities to mine the miners. Absolutely. That would go with his thesis as well, right? Because again, he's showing evidence of equal opportunities that existed for people to get rich in the West. But then foreign miners' taxes against Hispanics and Asians, does that fit his thesis of meritocracy, of equality of opportunity for everybody? Of course not, right? Because that's showing that there was an unfair disadvantage experienced by Hispanics and Asians. So that's the one that does not fit. And then in the section, again, these are right out of the argumentative assignments. In the section against his thesis, right, it does contend that those who already had money had an unfair advantage over those who didn't. So notice this is now going against his thesis, saying, basically contending, I don't believe that there was a true meritocracy that was established in the West before the Civil War, or after for that matter, that those who had money had an advantage over those who didn't, right? So that would be used as evidence against Turner's thesis. Discrimination faced by Hispanics and Asians, absolutely, that would go against his thesis. So both of those do. All right, and then in his history books written by Chicano authors, right, they're going to contend that Turner's thesis is false, right? That there did not exist a general equality of opportunity for, in particular, Hispanics, right, or Latinos. They're going to contend that, they're going to show evidence of them being victimized on many fronts. So for one, many lost their lands, or at least portions of them, despite the promises of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ended the Mexican-American War, that they could keep their property and be citizens. Did they preserve their culture well? Now we're talking about agency, how they fought back against this unfair discrimination. And some fought back within the system by running for office and becoming politicians, by becoming successful businessmen, like in San Antonio, Texas, Tucson,
Professor?
Arizona.
Yeah, the students are asking in the chat if you can scroll down.
The chat, let me see here. Okay, let me see here. So assignment number 5, you say. All right, so just to ensure that I understand this, Jamie, go ahead and send me a Canvas message, okay?
Okay, you already answered it in the beginning of class.
Oh, okay, good.
Thanks.
And then Robert Anderson's, I have that. Let's see here. Asking me if I could scroll down, but I seem to be unable to do so. That's as far down as it allows me to move up and down. And it said 4, and these are only 3 comments. So if there's another question on here, yeah, I'm moving up and down to the utmost on my computer, and it's not doing anything beyond that. If there's a question that I couldn't gain access to beneath those, could you please unmute yourself and ask me? And if you're bashful about it, could you just let me know by the end of the video? That's always an option, you guys, that when we finish, I say goodbye, you guys could go ahead and sign off. And then one or two students sometimes want to hold on because they don't want to, you know, perhaps express their a personal issue or some type of question before the rest of the class. And I'm very happy to be sensitive to your sense of privacy. And so I can speak with you at the end if you need that, if that will help you. And I could also cut that part off when I post it of the recording. So keep that in mind as well. All right, and so let's see here.
So, okay, now you're able to scroll down.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant scroll down on the chats.
Oh, no.
I could scroll down on the test. Sorry about
Yes.
that. Sorry about that. Misunderstanding. Okay. So with so yeah, so you have the loss of lands and show ways in which they were Hispanics were victimized, but also show agency and degrees to which they reacted to their circumstances heroically. So preserving their culture well, fighting back within and beyond the system. Those are all true. His interpretation of the West as a mini example of equality of opportunity, no way. Like I said, Chicano historians do not accept Turner's thesis that there was genuine equality of opportunity. All right. Now moving on to the alleged causes of the Civil War. So now you're looking at number 1 on that new handout, okay? So you have, for instance, let's see here, economic and demographic changes that happen in responses to those changes. So the idea is, right, is you're looking at how, what shook things up to cause the Civil War. Clearly, you had factions that promoted slavery, factions that opposed slavery, factions that were indifferent to slavery, right? Or opposed or supported slavery for all the wrong reasons, perhaps. It was messy, right? But throughout the 1800s, you didn't have a civil war over it. So what happened to really cause the Civil War to happen when it did, right? And so some people would contend, okay, for one is in court history, is they said there was an intellectual enlightenment. There was like an intellectual revolution that happened in the psyche of the individuals and in culture as well, okay? That made the population going into 1861 no longer okay with just putting the issue of slavery under the rug and not talking about it and not voting on it, etc. Right? And so this is court history, because remember, court history is written by winners in history, and it tries to justify the winners. And so they're trying to praise the North for winning the Civil War. They're trying to praise Abraham Lincoln as our president, as a crusader, right? And they're trying to praise the country and contending that we are a special country, that we're not the average run-of-the-mill country, that we're exceptional, right? That we were born upon ideas, these lofty beliefs and ideals, right? And so hence the Civil War in court history is seen as that type of crusade to end the evil of slavery, because that's not what this country supposedly stands for, okay? And so, so you have economic and demographic changes, people moving to the West, population increases, the technological and industrial changes that brought about changes in socioeconomic classes, right? And the argument was, as Americans began materially to do better for themselves, right? And you think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that first you got to worry about your basics, right? Your basic refuge and food and supplies and so forth, and you live at a primitive level. But once you live on a more sophisticated, comfortable level, then you can start tackling more philosophical, more intrinsically kind of esoteric things about what's the meaning of life, what is the identity of this country, what direction do we want to go in, etc. So court historians do contend that economic and demographic changes did force Americans to confront issues and want to confront issues in a more confrontational way than in the past, and wanted them to improve people, improve humanity, improve institutions, etc. So there was also a religious awakening that may have worked on the collective psyche of Americans. There was a philosophical movement that was American, sort of. It picked and chose from different worldviews and religions and philosophies, and it was known as the Transcendental Movement or Transcendentalism. So that did happen as well. And remember, the Transcendentalists, they wanted you to transcend your mere, lower animal-like level of living and try to find for yourself the meaning of life, and so forth. There were a myriad of reform movements that we're going to get into very shortly. And so all of that they explain as evidence of American idealism, of Americans of this generation being exceptional, and that they were very idealistic, say court historians, in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, whereby they wanted to change and improve the world. And they were no longer okay, like their ancestors had been, with just turning a blind eye to slavery, for instance. Okay? So all that is meant to be conveyed in court history on number 19. So what were some of the reforms? Well, before we get into that, yes.
So it's true or just conveyed in court history?
It's true. It's true.
Okay.
Yeah. So because notice, right? I don't try to trick you guys. I don't mean to, but it just says the instructor mentioned, right? These factors.
Yes.
And explaining evidence for there being an idealistic generation before the Civil War. So yeah, technically that is true. I did mention that. All right. So what do they want to improve? They want to improve the nuclear family, absolutely, from perceived dysfunctions. They were worried about husbands going to prostitutes and it might cause a divorce. They were worried about husbands drinking too much and engaging in domestic violence or abuse at home. They're worried about the kids moving out and going to school and to apprentice themselves to some type of worker or to work in these mills and to very quickly gain a sense of independence and lose their ties, or move into the cities and lose their ties with their families and parents. So they were concerned about A. They protest against conformity, against a bourgeois industrializing society. Absolutely. That's a transcendentalist for sure, right? I think of like Henry David Thoreau, where they said, don't just do what you're told. Don't just do what tradition tells you and what your institutional leaders tell you, your parents, your pastors and priests, and your politicians, etc., right? But to find out the meaning of life yourself through your own experiences and through introspection and philosophy and learning and reading, etc. And so absolutely, they were against a staid, very just kind of boring, monolithic society that was becoming bourgeois. And bourgeois, remember, just means of the city. So absolutely, they were concerned and protesting against that as well. And that is used as a tie to court history, right? Depicting them as an out of the ordinary, anomalously idealistic generation, wanting to improve society. So all of those are true. with antebellum reforms. Moving on to 21. What did they include? They included all the above. Prison and asylum reform with an emphasis on rehabilitation, a public education campaign. Remember the utopian movements that were mentioned? Remember, utopia means no place in Greek because it's too good to be true, trying to form these places like Oneida and Brook Farm and New Harmony. If you had extra time to read into those, where these utopian movements, they're fascinating. They would derisively be called later on in the 1970s hippie communes. Let's see here. The temperance movement against alcoholism, the Sabbath movement to make the Saturday, the seventh day of the week, holy. The Christian Sabbath, not the Jewish Sabbath. So it would be Sunday, the first day of the week. Let's see here. Abolitionist movement against slavery, sharing a fixation with self-restraint. All those are true as examples of reforms. So number 22, court history of the Civil War. Does it contend that the struggle was ultimately one of factions fighting for political and economic domination? Does that sound like court history and praising the country and making us look idealistic as a nation of ideals and lofty ideas? Not at all, right? If you have two factions just fighting it out of self-interest and for domination, there's nothing romantic about that. So notice for 22, that should be revisionist history, which revises the rosy court image. So because it says court history, it's false. It's revisionist history that is arguing. Number 23, radical Republicans were depicted as the conciliatory arm of the Republican Party. Did they want peace at all costs? And they wanted to appease the oppositional politicians, these radical Republicans, according to your handout? Of course not. They were rabble rousers. They were troublemakers. They were instigators, and they were proud of it. They wore it like a badge, according to court historians, right? And why? For a very simple reason, is they felt like their society was sick and needed help, and that slavery was immoral. It was wrong. They even used the term sinful and evil. And so they were proud of being troublemakers and saying, no, we're not okay. We're not going to be conciliatory and give in to the demands of our political opponents. We're going to make demands that change be brought about. So, of course, that one is false. Number 24, court history emphasizes the degree to which abolitionists and radical Republicans forced public discourse on slavery and ceasing to accept compromise or constitutional sanction of slavery and beginning to use more aggressive tactics. Absolutely, that is true. And I cited some individuals. One spelt like the fish, Salmon Chase, Wendell Phillips. Some of these gentlemen, Benjamin Wade Davis. You have these gentlemen that they became adamant that change be made politically. And look into your handout, and I give examples of what they did. All right. Number 25, does court history depict Abraham Lincoln as a bold abolitionist from the beginning? Do they go that far in court history? Because after all, court history praises the winners. So you could easily guess that it's going to speak well of Abraham Lincoln, but it does not go that far on 25, right? Is they contend that there was character development that that Abraham Lincoln experienced and worked through. That he was at first in his early life somewhat apathetic about slavery because it didn't affect his personal life. And then he contends that in the summers of 1838 and 1841, he saw slaves shackled for the first time on the Ohio and the Mississippi rivers, and that it ate at his conscience, and it slowly started to work and unnerving in his spirit and in his mind. that slowly began to bring about a sense of moral compass, of right and wrong, and a sense of courage and wanting to do something about this uncomfortable, immoral practice and institution that grated on his soul, according to him. So, but notice with 25, he was not depicted as a full-blown abolitionist from the beginning. Which of the following would most likely be used by revisionist historians against the court history image of Abraham Lincoln? So you're looking for that, which is going to really make him look poorly. So A, quotes challenging the rationale used to defend slavery? No. Because while he did challenge the rationale used by the pro-South arguments by like John C. Calhoun and other Southern defenders of slavery, does that make him look poorly? No, it makes him look good. It makes him look progressive. It makes him look idealistic, morally sensitive, etc., and intelligent to be able to crack their rationale. So remember, he says, is it because they're black and we're white? And he says, okay, so then in that case, you could become the slave to the next person that you meet with skin lighter than your own. Oh, you say it's because we're more intelligent than African Americans? Well, beware again. You could become the slave by that rationale to the next person more intelligent than you are. So very interesting, provocative quotes that he wrote and spoke. B, the interpretation of Lincoln's concession to border states as a temporary chess move. Remember, temporarily, he told the border states they could keep their slaves if they fought with the North, with the Union in the Civil War. But defenders of Lincoln contend that he used this only as a chess move because he felt he militarily needed the help of Tennessee and Kentucky. And once he no longer needed their military help, he was going to free their slaves next. They just didn't know it yet. So while this one is true as well, factually, again, this interpreted as a chess move that he felt he had to make at the time, that would be court history as well. So that wouldn't be used by revisionist historians either. C, Lincoln's quote against political and social equality between the two races? Absolutely. C. He has a very ugly quote where he tells a racist white audience that arguably was about to lynch him because some of the anti-slavery comments he had just made. And they began to rise from their stumps that they were sitting on, call him an inward lover, call him a radical, and to try to appease this racist crowd, he said, wait a minute, guys. All I want is an end to slavery. I'm not asking for the political, much less the social equality between black and white Americans. He says, and inasmuch as there must be an inequality between black and white Americans, I, as much as any white man, am in favor of the white race being superior. Sounds terrible. So that would be used by revisionist historians. C. His opposition to options for the establishment of slavery in the Western territories. Remember, the Southern Democrats wanted people in California, people in Nebraska and Kansas, etc., in the far West to choose for themselves if they want slavery. They said that's only fair as a compromise, right? Known as popular sovereignty. He'd have none of that. He said, nope, slavery is immoral. This is not to be decided upon democratically by the local people. Slavery should be prohibited anywhere else in these new Western states taken from Mexico and becoming states from the Louisiana Purchase before that. So that is true, but that's court history, right? That makes him look heroic. It makes him look brave, taking a stand, saying no to slavery in the West. So revisionist historians wouldn't want to use that. and neither would they want to use his support of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. All right, and now 27 through 30. Court historians argue that it was the troublemaking, in a good way, right? The troublemaking of the abolitionists, of the radical Republicans, who helped force America to have discourse or dialogue or conversation and confront the slavery issue. But they were helped, state court historians, by events that were polarizing in nature during the 1850s and bringing about the Civil War. And remember, if something is polarizing, like with magnetism, it causes people to magnetically gravitate to one side or another, right? So it included chaotic and confrontational consequences to political solutions. That is true. Look at the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where they stated that we're going to allow Kansas and Nebraska to decide for themselves, right, if they want slavery or not, by virtually a popular referendum, virtually a popular vote. Well, what happened according to your handout? Both sides contended that the other side cheated and that they won the election, and both formed an oppositional government to the other. Both refused to stand down until a civil war happened in Kansas in 1854, and it was known as Bleeding Kansas episode. The Compromise of 1850 allowed California to come in as a free state, but then instituted a strict and fugitive or runaway slave law. 5 northern states refused to abide by it. So these are legal ways of trying to resolve the slave issue that were not settled legally. That's scary, right? That's getting to the Civil War, where you're trying to make political solutions to problems, and those political solutions are ending in violent opposition and in chaotic conditions. An Underground Railroad in an attempt to foment a slave insurrection by John Brown. Those happened, and they definitely were polarizing, causing Americans to kind of choose one side or the other. The Supreme Court trying to ensure the enslavement and disenfranchisement of Black men in the Dred Scott case. Absolutely. So hence, it's all the above. So I hope in addition to getting the right answers on this, I hope that you're learning something, okay? Revisionist history portrays the Civil War as a moral crusade against the institution and practice of slavery. Is that true? No, right? I swapped them. Court history portrays the Civil War as a moral crusade against the institution and practice of slavery, not revisionist. So I swapped those two. Evidence supporting revisionist history of the Civil War includes evidence of racism and discrimination in the North as well as in the South. Absolutely. Declarations by President Lincoln and Congress that combating slavery was not their primary concern. Absolutely. Written evidence that key political leaders stressed the need for African American men's military help as an ulterior motive for freeing them to get them to fight for the Union? Absolutely. All of those are included as evidence for revisionist history, contending this was not a moral crusade. So revisionist data on Abraham Lincoln includes all but except. Remember, revisionist, it's going to make him look poorly. So you're looking for the one that doesn't make him look poorly. His Declaration of Emancipation only for slaves of rebels in the Emancipation Proclamation. That is true. And that does make him look rather poorly. In hindsight, arguably. An infamous quote against social and political equality of Black and white Americans. We've already mentioned that. Absolutely. Evidence that he dragged his feet in confronting slavery in states where it had already been sanctioned. Absolutely. And that also makes him look poorly. His refusal to place any radical Republicans in his cabinet. That would make him look poorly, but it's not true, right? It's simply not true. So because it's not true, it wouldn't be included in revisionist data. So D's the one that doesn't fit. Now, after all this time, okay, that I've given you to make sure that you have your textbooks by extending the date for your quizzes to be due, right? By giving you the answers to the textbook questions on both test 1 and test 2. Now again, kind of putting my foot down, if you will. I hope you don't mind, but I'm not going to give you 31 through 35. You could take a look at them, but I want you to figure those out with your textbook yourself. So look at 31. The textbook contends that the Free Soil Party's formation signaled the inability of the existing parties to contain the political passions created by the slavery issue. So you could go to the back of your book, look up Free Soil Party, and it'll give you the pages where it's mentioned. Number 32, Antietam, according to the text, hosted the war's bloodiest day of battle. Again, you could either go to the back and hopefully find Antietam. If not, go to chapter 14, the fighting of the Civil War, and look for Antietam in chapter 14. The textbook contends on 33 that the Union leader George B. McClellan's tenacity and willingness to sacrifice soldiers helped defeat the Confederacy. Is that true? Go to chapter 14 and look up George B. McClellan. Is he depicted in that manner? 34, Brinkley's test and class lecture stressed Northern economic and naval superiority, as well as higher morale and superior generals. Are all of those true according to the test? And what I lectured in the video on the last assignment on fighting the Civil War. And number 35, at the end of the war, Grant's army deprived Richmond of resources and trapped Lee's mobile army. And Sherman helped break the, quote, will of the South with his destruction of Atlanta and march through South Carolina. Again, look at chapter 14, look up the ending, the conclusion of the Civil War, and see if it describes that as true between Grant and Sherman and helping the North win the Civil War over the South, the Confederacy. All right, so now I have 14 participants. Okay, I have everyone. Okay, so again, make sure you remember that you have one submission for test 3. This is the only thing in the whole semester that I just give you only one submission for, okay? So make it count. Have your argumentative assignments, you know, out and accessible. If you could print them out, that'd be great. Virtually everything comes out of them on my tests. Have your textbook ready for the last 5 questions, okay? And please remember, for the duration of this week, I will be in and out. And so don't be bashful. Make use of the phone number that I gave you. If you have anything last minute that I need to know as I'm computing your final grades and finishing the last 4 or 5 assignments. All right, so are there any questions or comments before we bid adieu? Anyone at all?
Yeah, do you have other students talking to you after this meeting?
Like I said, I've had it happen. It could be my other school, but I know I've had it happen, I think 3 times this semester. So,
okay.
So matter of fact, I'll offer that opportunity right now, okay? And please remember also, I have no problem taking off the end of this recording. If you know, for the very reason that you're wanting to, you know, to just speak to me, if you want that privacy, I'm fine with that. I can edit the end off the video and you can have your privacy. It's the closest thing I can do to having like an in-office visit from you, right? During these kind of COVID and just post-COVID, quasi-post-COVID times. All right. So you guys have a great, not to be dramatic, but you guys have a great life. This is it. If you don't take 17B from me, I look forward to getting back to the class, the actual class, and have better interaction with students. But if I don't see you again, just take care of yourselves. I wish you well. And like I said, make use of that phone number if you like, to let me know of anything I need to be aware of as I'm finishing the grades this weekend. So if you don't want to stick around and have a private conversation and ask me or give me some information that I need to be privy to, I'll go ahead and say goodbye, okay? You guys take care.
Professor, if I conduct you after the class, please.
Sure. So yeah, so right now, everyone else, if you don't have a question or don't need to speak with me, feel free to sign off, okay?
Thank you, bye, Professor.
Yes, Xander?
Thank you, bye, Professor.
Thank you, Xander. I appreciate that. Take care.
Professor, I can just go ahead and canvas you or text you if that works out, since you do have to speak to someone else. I did have a question. Would those participation points for the videos also be included in our grade? I'm sorry, the participation point. The participation points that you mentioned at the beginning of the semester, you know, when we have our Zoom meetings. Yes. What I'm likely going to do is I'm likely going to add them onto your test 3 scores. Because to be honest, most of the time, my test 3 scores are the lowest scores of all scores. Okay. All right. Okay. And I know you mentioned about, because I think I didn't, you know what, I'll go ahead and canvas you and text you just in case if it's like crucial. Sure. Okay. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for everything. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
I have a question.
Yes.
Where are you going? Was this test 3 we're going over?
That's right.
Wait, so were you giving the answers?
I pretty much did. Yes.
Oh, wait,
I didn't intend to do that, but I did. So yeah.
Okay, because I joined late, so I don't know if I was able to like get everything down,
Yeah.
of what you said. So should I like stay after everyone's done, or are you gonna publish it?
Well, you know what? I could do one of two things if you don't mind. My throat is killing me. I'm exhausted. And so I
Yeah.
don't know if I have it in me to go through every one like I just did.
Mhm.
So, but what I can do is let you look at it, give you a couple minutes on each page, and ask me if you have questions as far as a particular number. And also, what I can do is I could try immediately to get my wife to help me to post this as soon as possible, so you can watch the whole video.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Okay.
There was also a video that you published, but it said it was showing like it was a private video, so I wasn't able to view it. So
Oh no. And it
I'm
was
pretty
one
sure.
of the it was on one of the assignments, like the coming of the Civil War or the Civil War.
Let me check. But yeah, for this one, I can just look at the recording whenever you publish it. When's the test due?
It is due, I believe, the 24th. So you have 3 more days.
Okay, so if the video is published by then I think that would be okay.
Oh, for sure. I'm going to try to have it published by this evening.
All right.
Okay. Now, like I said, while I don't have enough gas in my tank to go through every one like I did, I'd be happy to show you like this, give you a minute or two, ask if you have a question or two of these that you'd like me to address. Otherwise, the video will be posted as soon as possible.
Okay. It was the Fighting the Civil War video, the
Oh,
July
shoot.
19th one.
Right.
I'm not able to access it.
Okay, shoot. All right, so fighting this, I'm very sorry about that. That's news to me. So let me see what I can do about that. And then for anybody on fighting the Civil War that turns it in late, I'll take it easy on them.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
All right, yeah. So I'll just wait for the recording and then I think that's good enough.
Okay, you got it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with everything. Hi, Parminderjeet.
Professor, to have you say a little bit regarding I just want to let you know regarding my assignments. I am turning them in. It's just I'm kind of really behind due to some issues.
Oh, okay.
Wait, just hold. Sorry. I just want to make sure that I know it's not your issue, but I just want to let you know that I'm kind of behind and I will turn it in hopefully by Saturday if it's okay with you.
Yes, yeah. To be honest, it has to be by Saturday because otherwise, literally Canvas won't accept them after that.
I understand. It's just that I work and then I also have a chronic back issue that's been ongoing. So and then I have other things. So all the health issue wise, I can't sit too long or stay up too long to finish. I try to, but I guess at the end of the day, it just feels like so frustrating that I can't finish it. So I just want to let you know. So by Saturday, I'll try to send everything in whatever I can.
Okay, no problem.
And I'll message you.
Okay, thank you. That'd be perfect, Parminderjeet. And I assure you, like I said, this is the very reason why I reserve the right in my syllabus to break my own rules. For instance, the rule that you get automatic 40 at best out of 50 for turning in something late.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna take it easier on you because of your circumstances. Okay, so
thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
And in case, I mean, I don't know if you need any proof or anything from a doctor's note. I mean, I can say.
No, that's okay. I appreciate that enhances your credibility, but I believe you.
Thank you, and you have a good rest of the summer.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.